Most people believe that being good will protect them. They believe that fairness creates safety, that honesty invites respect, that kindness disarms hostility. This belief is comforting. It is also incomplete. The world does not operate on moral balance. It operates on psychological patterns. And patterns do not care about intentions. Good people are not weak because they lack strength. They are vulnerable because they are readable. They explain themselves. They justify their actions. They seek understanding instead of leverage. This does not make them inferior. It makes them predictable. And predictability is the first currency of control. Power does not begin with force. It begins with anticipation. The moment someone can anticipate your reaction, they no longer need to overpower you. They only need to guide you. This is not about turning you into something you are not. It is not about manipulation techniques or dominance games. It is about awareness, because the most dangerous form of control is the kind that feels like your own choice. From an early age, we are conditioned to associate goodness with safety. We are told that ethical behavior will be rewarded, that fairness will be recognized, that truth will prevail. Psychologically, this creates a powerful internal rule. If I do the right thing, the system will protect me. But human systems are not moral systems, they are social systems. And social systems reward effectiveness before virtue. This is why people who break rules often rise faster than those who follow them perfectly. Not because the rule breakers are smarter, but because they are less constrained by internal expectations. They do not assume fairness. They assess incentives. Good people often confuse morality with immunity. They believe that their intentions will be understood, that their restraint will be appreciated. In reality, restraint is often interpreted as capacity, not capacity for kindness, but capacity for tolerance. Every social interaction is a test, even subtle ones. A delayed reply, a dismissive tone, a boundary pushed slightly, then slightly more. People do not test those they fear losing. They test those they believe will stay. This is not cruelty, it is psychology. The mind constantly scans for limits. When no resistance appears, it assumes permission. This is how control begins, quietly, not with threats, not with commands, but with small, unchallenged adjustments to your behavior. You agree once to avoid conflict. You stay silent to keep harmony. You explain yourself to be understood. Each choice feels reasonable, even virtuous, but cumulatively, they rewrite your position in the social hierarchy. You move from participant to respondent, from agent to reactor. The most effective forms of manipulation are not aggressive, they are accommodating. They rely on your desire to be fair, your need to be consistent, your discomfort with ambiguity. Consistency is one of the strongest psychological drives. Once you behave a certain way, your mind wants to remain aligned with that identity. I'm a reasonable person. I'm not confrontational. I don't like unnecessary conflict. These identities become levers, not because someone imposed them on you, but because you protect them yourself. This is why manipulation does not feel like coercion. It feels like cooperation. You believe you are choosing peace, when in reality, you are surrendering initiative. Power does not require domination when compliance is voluntary. Historically, the most stable systems of control were not built on fear alone, but on participation. People obeyed not because they were forced, but because the system aligned with their self-image. This is the uncomfortable truth. The more someone identifies as good, the harder it becomes for them to disrupt a dynamic that exploits them. Because disruption feels like betrayal, not of others, but of themselves. Awareness changes this, not by making you cruel, but by making you precise. You begin to separate morality from strategy, intention from outcome, self-image from self-protection. You stop asking, "Is this fair?" and start asking, "What does this condition me to accept next?" This shift is subtle but irreversible. Once you see patterns, you cannot unsee them. You begin to notice how often silence is expected from you, how often explanation is demanded from you, how often your calmness is used as a resource by others. And you realize something critical. Goodness without boundaries is not virtue. It is exposure. This will not teach you how to control others. It will teach you how control works. So you are no longer its easiest target. Because the goal is not power over people. The goal is sovereignty over yourself. To understand persuasion, you must first abandon a comforting myth. That influence is something aggressive people do to passive ones. In reality, persuasion works best when it feels invisible. The human mind does not resist what it believes it has chosen. This is why predictability is so valuable. When your reactions follow a consistent pattern, others do not need to pressure you. They only need to frame options in a way that aligns with your habits. This is not manipulation by force. It is manipulation by design. Every decision you make exists inside a psychological context. That context can be shaped. Persuasion does not begin with arguments. It begins with assumptions. If someone assumes you are reasonable, they will present unreasonable demands calmly. If someone assumes you dislike conflict, they will create situations where refusal feels like escalation. If someone assumes you value being understood, they will misunderstand you strategically. None of this requires malice. It only requires observation. People who are good at persuasion are not necessarily intelligent. They are attentive. They notice how long you hesitate before responding. They notice what you apologize for. They notice what you explain without being asked. Explanations are particularly revealing. When you explain yourself preemptively, you signal that you feel accountable, even when no accountability was requested. This shifts the psychological balance. The one who explains positions themselves as subordinate to the one who judges. Over time, this dynamic becomes automatic. You begin to anticipate objections before they exist. You soften statements that were never challenged. You negotiate against yourself. This is not weakness. It is conditioning. Persuasion thrives on cognitive shortcuts. The mind prefers ease over accuracy. One of the most powerful shortcuts is familiarity. The more often an idea is encountered, the more truthful it feels, regardless of its actual validity. This is called the illusion of truth effect. It is why propaganda rarely invents new ideas. It repeats existing ones with emotional timing. A statement does not need to be correct. It needs to be recognizable. Once familiarity is established, resistance decreases. This is why persuasive environments feel calm. Nothing appears urgent. Nothing appears forced. Urgency creates scrutiny. Calm creates acceptance. Another critical mechanism is commitment. Once you publicly commit to a position, your mind works to defend it, even against contradictory evidence. This is why persuasive systems rarely demand extreme agreement at first. They ask for small, reasonable alignment, a nod, a shared concern, a minor concession. Each agreement becomes a psychological anchor. Over time, Withdrawing feels inconsistent, and inconsistency feels threatening to identity. So you remain aligned, even as the position subtly shifts. This is not deception. It is momentum. Persuasion is cumulative. No single step appears manipulative. Only the final position feels unfamiliar. And by then, reversing course feels more uncomfortable than continuing forward. This is how people end up defending beliefs they would have rejected months earlier, not because they were convinced, but because they were gradually repositioned. The most effective persuasive structures do not tell you what to think. They tell you how to think about thinking. They frame skepticism as negativity, doubt as ignorance, silence as complicity. Once these frames are accepted, self-censorship begins. You filter your own thoughts before anyone else needs to. This is the highest level of control, not compliance, but internal regulation. The danger is not that others influence you. Influence is unavoidable. The danger is being unaware of the forces shaping your choices. Awareness interrupts momentum. The moment you pause and ask, "Why does this feel reasonable?" you slow the process. Persuasion depends on flow. Interruption weakens it. This is why silence is powerful. Not reactive silence, intentional silence. When you do not immediately respond, you deny others the data they rely on. You disrupt prediction. Uncertainty forces recalibration. People become cautious when they cannot anticipate consequences. This is not about intimidation. It is about opacity. Transparency is praised as virtue, but psychologically, total transparency is exposure. Every disclosed value becomes a pressure point. Every declared boundary becomes something to negotiate. Strategic restraint is not dishonesty. It is self-preservation. You are not obligated to reveal your internal processes to people who have not earned access to them. One of the most overlooked aspects of persuasion is emotional regulation. Emotions are not weaknesses. They are signals. But signals can be intercepted. If your emotional reactions are immediate and visible, they become tools. Frustration invites delay. Eagerness invites exploitation. Guilt invites pressure. The goal is not emotional suppression. It is emotional timing. When emotions are expressed deliberately, they retain meaning. When they are expressed reflexively, they lose power. Control is not dominance, it is authorship. Who determines the pace of interaction? Who defines what is normal? Who decides when something is resolved? These questions shape outcomes far more than arguments ever will. People who understand this do not argue often. They frame. They shift context until the conclusion feels inevitable. This audiobook does not give you techniques to impose your will. It gives you a lens to recognize when your will is being shaped. Once you recognize leverage, you are no longer moved unconsciously by it. You may still choose to agree. You may still choose to cooperate. But it will be a choice, not a drift. That distinction changes everything, because the moment you stop being predictable, you stop being easy. And when ease disappears, respect often follows. Power does not announce itself as power. Throughout history, the most enduring systems of control were not built on constant violence, but on psychological alignment. Force is expensive. Resistance is unpredictable. But belief is efficient. When people believe a system is natural, necessary, or morally justified, they defend it voluntarily. This is why power always seeks narrative before enforcement. Empires did not last because of armies alone. They lasted Because citizens internalized the logic of the empire, order was framed as stability, obedience as virtue, dissent as danger. This pattern repeats across centuries, cultures, and ideologies. The language changes. The structure does not. Every system creates an image of the good person, law-abiding, cooperative, responsible, reasonable. This image becomes a psychological mold. Those who fit it are rewarded with inclusion. Those who question it are framed as disruptive, ungrateful, or immoral. The system does not need to silence critics aggressively. It isolates them socially. And humans fear isolation more than punishment. Propaganda at its core is not about lies. It is about emphasis. What is repeated becomes important. What is ignored becomes invisible. Over time, people stop asking whether something is true and start asking whether it is acceptable to question. This is how control matures. The most effective narratives do not tell you what to believe. They tell you what kind of person believes certain things. Once belief is linked to identity, logic becomes irrelevant. Challenging the idea feels like attacking the self. This is why moral language is so powerful. When power frames itself as moral necessity, resistance feels selfish. When compliance is framed as goodness, refusal feels cruel. History shows this pattern repeatedly. Systems reward those who adapt quickly to new norms, not those who question their origin. And once adaptation becomes habitual, people forget that alternatives ever existed. Control succeeds when it feels boring, when rules are no longer noticed, when assumptions are no longer questioned. The most controlled populations are not the most oppressed. They are the most normalized. This is where good people become essential to systems. They enforce norms socially. They shame deviation. They correct behavior without being asked, not because they are malicious, but because they are invested in coherence. They want the system to make sense, and they want their role within it to feel meaningful. Power rarely needs to punish when conformity is internalized. This is the final evolution of control, when people defend the structure that limits them, not because they are ignorant, but because the structure provides identity. Understanding this is uncomfortable because it reveals that control is not imposed from above alone. It is distributed, maintained through participation, reinforced through silence. This does not mean all systems are evil. It means all systems shape behavior. And anyone who claims immunity to influence is already influenced. Awareness does not destroy systems. It creates distance. Distance allows choice. You stop reacting automatically to narratives. You stop moralizing complexity. You stop assuming alignment equals truth. Instead, you observe. Who benefits from this belief? Who gains from this behavior becoming normal? Who is discouraged from speaking? These questions dissolve illusion. They return agency to the individual. Power fears nothing more than psychologically independent people, not rebels, not critics, but individuals who can cooperate without surrendering their autonomy. Because such people cannot be easily categorized, cannot be easily pressured, cannot be easily replaced. They are not hostile. They are simply unreachable through predictable levers. That is why systems prefer certainty over intelligence. Certainty is manageable. Ambiguity is not. And the person who can live comfortably in ambiguity without rushing to resolution is the hardest to control. At this point, a critical distinction must be made. Understanding psychological mechanisms does not grant moral authority. It grants responsibility. There is a difference between awareness and exploitation. This video does not exist to teach domination. Domination is crude and unstable. It exists to restore authorship. Self-mastery begins where reactivity ends. Most people believe control means forcing outcomes. In reality, control means choosing responses. The moment you are emotionally hijacked, you are no longer acting. You are being acted upon. This is why emotional regulation is foundational. Not suppression, not denial, but delay. Delay interrupts conditioning. When you do not respond immediately, you reclaim the space where choice exists. You stop feeding the patterns others rely on. Silence, used consciously, is not passivity. It is a refusal to be rushed into a frame you did not choose. Boundaries operate the same way. A boundary is not an explanation. It is a decision. The more you justify a boundary, the more negotiable it becomes. Clarity does not require justification. You are allowed to disengage. You are allowed to withhold access. You are allowed to change your position. Consistency is valuable, but only when it serves growth, not confinement. Ethical awareness means understanding when cooperation becomes self-erasure. You do not owe availability. You do not owe emotional transparency. You do not owe alignment. Respect is not earned through compliance. It is earned through coherence. When your actions match your internal standards, regardless of pressure, you become difficult to manipulate, not because you resist everything, but because you are selective. Manipulation thrives on urgency. Self-mastery thrives on patience. Manipulation relies on fear of loss. Self-mastery relies on acceptance of uncertainty. The less you fear losing approval, the harder you are to steer. This does not mean becoming detached or indifferent. It means becoming grounded. Grounded people do not need to dominate. They do not need to persuade aggressively. They do not need to control narratives. Their presence sets limits without confrontation. Because they do not chase outcomes, others cannot easily bait them with consequences. This is the paradox of power. Those who seek control most desperately are the easiest to control. Those who can walk away rarely need to. Ethical strength is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not threaten. It simply refuses to be moved by illegitimate pressure. The goal is not superiority. The goal is sovereignty. To think clearly under influence, to choose deliberately under pressure, to remain intact in systems designed to fragment attention and agency. When you understand how manipulation works, you do not become manipulative. You become calm, and calm is disruptive, because calm does not react as expected. The most dangerous thing to any system of control is a person who understands the game and still chooses their own pace, not faster, not louder, but consciously. This is where dark psychology ends and maturity begins. Awareness without cruelty, strength without domination, clarity without illusion. You do not need to control others to live free from control. You only need to stop being predictable. And when you do, power loses its grip, not with a fight, but with irrelevance. Because control only works when it knows where you are going next. Power does not disappear when you understand it. It becomes optional. And that is the highest form of freedom.